So today's lesson is about using a flash to overpower the sun. This is a great technique, whether you're photographing flowers in nature or portraits. You always want to remember several aspects to any image. First is technical. So in this particular scenario, you do want to use flash and you want to make sure you have the proper exposure on the background as well. Your subject, you always want to find an interesting subject, whether it is nature or a person. Composition, compose with intention. Whenever I'm using flash, I like to take care of all the technical stuff first. Once I get the proper exposure, then I reshoot for composition. Then I start really looking at the details all around the frame to get the best composed image possible. And lastly, I'll take time if necessary to post-process. If your sensor has any dust spots, you definitely want to remove that. If you have some small adjustments or crops in the image, and of course, if there's any little things with exposure you might want to change. So with that, let's get started about overpowering the sun. So it's just as simple as this step-by-step that I have listed here. You do want to use manual exposure pretty much anytime you're using flash. That's what I would recommend. You have the limitations of whatever your sync speed is. So generally around 1/200th of a second. Your most camera combinations and flashes cannot go above that. So you'll start with that setting. You want to intentionally underexpose the background. So if you see the image on the top here of the flower, I've intentionally underexposed to reduce as much light as possible. Notice my subject has gone to black. This is direct sunlight, and with the limitations of the 1/200th of a second, that is as dark as I could get the exposure. Then I can add off-camera flash to illuminate the subject. So starting off, because I am overpowering the full sun, I'm going to start with a little higher power. I believe I started at about 1/4 of a second, took a picture, and then looked at my histogram to see if that was properly exposed or not. And then you can adjust the power of the flash as needed, either by on the flash, changing the actual power, or possibly getting it closer or further away from your subject. The last step is I would want to then recompose. These images don't have any wonderful composition. It's just a matter of the technical aspects. So let's kind of pre-visualize. If you come across a scene, this is at a house in the front porch, and notice the different flowers. This is what I'm going to concentrate on. As I'm viewing through the scenario, I want to identify where it is I want to shoot. So first off, I do have a little bit of wind that I need to consider. And I want to try to find a good looking flower. I want to try to find as simple of a background as possible, because that will just make things that much easier. I don't want to use that light spot that's in the top right-hand corner as a background, because we want the lightest area to be on our actual flower on the subject, not on the background. So when I start off without flash, I do always turn off the flash to get my ambient exposure first. So a traditional 0 on the meter scale, proper exposure was 1/60th of a second. I didn't want to go any slower by any means because of the wind, but even at that slower shutter speed, a little blurriness might come about with the wind. So I found my proper exposure, but then I wanted to intentionally underexpose. So then I boosted up to my synchronization speed to 1/200th of a second. And then I added flash, getting the image on the right. Now my background is still present, but it's not as noticeable as in that very first image without the flash. So if I want to make some changes, I can also add a different background using just some black foam board or something else like that. And then I can really simplify my image. The black foam board with the black part of the statements really helps it to pop. Okay, so you see the transition of the different images as I worked my way through it. Notice the very last image, I have changed the white balance so I get a much warmer feel to the flower. Here's another scenario using off-camera and daylight nature, of course. And this particular case in a garden, notice it is shaded. It's not full sun, so that will help me getting a darker exposure. I'm going to use the same step-by-step procedure. The first picture on the left just shows the general scene. The image on the right, I have with manual exposure. intentionally underexpose the background, and then I'm ready to add flash. So here I've added flash. It illuminates a little bit of everything, kind of a busy photo. And now I've actually turned down the power of the flash to make it a little bit more complementary. Still haven't adjusted the busyness yet. So I have now added a black background to simplify. I've also switched to a little bit longer lens so I can find just one or two iris plants instead of the whole group of iris. So starting with the image on the left, that was the whole grouping. I got closer, used a longer lens, still have my black background, and I've illuminated the iris there in that center picture. The picture on the right, I've adjusted the flash angle so I can manipulate the angle to find different examples of light and different shadows and highlight to see what I think is most complementary to my subject. That middle image, I did reduce the flash power down to about a 64th because I was not overpowering bright sun. I was already in the shade. It didn't take that much flash to illuminate the subject. The last thing when you're looking at backgrounds and looking at subjects like this is consider if you need to groom something. You don't want to pull other flowers out, but if there is a dead leaf or a dead flower that's falling off, you might be able to pick that if it's a friendly type groom and non-destructive to the plant. The strategy works the same with people. So go ahead and give that a try. You could even incorporate a sunburst in the background as well.